What is going on? Hopefully you had a great weekend, college football championship game weekend at that. My Texas Longhorns went down. We'll get into all that. We did get the college football rankings final, so we know the playoff seeding, bowl games, all that. I'm not going to go through all the bowl games, but talk about the playoff seeding and stuff like that. But first, I kind of want to recap, the play, the college football, not college football, but the championship games, because some of these were really, really good. It was really interesting to watch UNLV and Boise State. That was a great game. Ashton Genty, 209 yards, beast moding it. It was a fun game to watch. I tried to watch Tulane Army a little bit. Army was kind of running away, so I just kind of kept more just watching Boise State. But yeah, Ashton Genty, real deal. Gonna be interesting to see how well he does in the playoff, in the college football playoff, because he's good, but obviously running back is only usually as good as their offensive line. And he actually took out his offensive line last week before their conference championship game, and he said running backs is basically nothing without their offensive line. So that was really good on him. Dude's got class. Look forward to seeing what he does in the pros. But dude is built for the pros, and that dude he's good. So look forward to seeing him in the playoffs. I will come back to Georgia, Texas. All the games on Saturday, though, were pretty good, except for the first one. We got Iowa State, Arizona. And some people were kind of calling this out, like, Iowa State, not really that good. I've actually been kind of high on Iowa State, and the big reason why is they play usually pretty clean ball, but whenever they don't play clean ball or they get behind, they don't really have the talent to kind of make that, come back or make up for it. Iowa State just didn't even let them have a chance to come back. Like, the hits in that game, some of them were just really pretty brutal. And Arizona State just absolutely put it on Iowa State. It was a pretty lopsided game. I think it was tied 10-10, and then it was just Iowa State turnover fest there for a period of time, and Arizona State just took full advantage. I mean, they didn't even squander any opportunity. They took full advantage. So Arizona State looked pretty good. It's my first time actually watching Scattaboo. He's got a pretty cool name. Dude is a thick-bodied guy, and kind of look forward to seeing how they do in college football playoff and who they will be playing. Ooh, we got some other big ones. SMU Clemson. So this game was really fascinating. For the ACC championship game, SMU to be there, a lot of people gave them no credit, going into the game or even going into the season to even be there at the end. Obviously, with Florida State having a complete screw-up year, gave someone an opportunity. SMU, new dog on campus, new horse on campus, new horse in the stable. Got an opportunity there. SMU actually showed some pretty good resiliency. They went into the fourth quarter down 17 and come all the way back. I didn't think they were going to be able to do that. I mean, Clemson was kind of just controlling that game pretty well, and they do wind up tying the game. And then I believe like in the last 30 seconds, when they tie it, they kick the ball off. Well, the kick returner returns it to their own 45. And Clemson then gets like a 10, 15-yard pass. It sets up like a 56-yard game-winning field goal. That's how Clemson won. It was a great game. You didn't think it was going to be that great like that going into the fourth, but it came out and like, damn, that was a good game. And so, yeah. Clemson getting that big win, getting into that college football playoff. There you go. Probably the one of the bigger two games was Oregon Penn State Big Ten championship game, and Oregon becomes another one of those new dog in a in the new conference winners, conference championship game winners. So there you go, Oregon. I'm pretty honest. Penn State, I mean, they did better than what I thought they were going to. I think they did better than what a lot of people probably thought they were going to, even though the line in this game was actually kind of closer than what people thought the game was going to be. But the game was actually never really that close. You got to give Oregon credit for that. And you also got to get Penn State to kind of keep it somewhat like they were in the game. They were there. They were there, but they weren't. Kind of like Oregon. They got up 3 scores, and anytime Penn State got back within 1 score, Oregon answered and went back up 2 scores. So that was kind of the way the game went. Oregon handled their business. I mean, there's no really shocking outcome for me in this game, other than the fact that Penn State actually scored 37 points. So Oregon defense cleaned that up, and it might have been they were just playing a little bit like, hey, we're gonna make y'all use time, not just get down the field with explosive plays. I don't even know if Penn State can do explosive plays, but there you go. Georgia, Texas, SEC championship game. Probably the biggest one going into the weekend, because these 2 teams are among the top tier. And my Texas Longhorns did go down to the Georgia Bulldogs. And my thoughts on the game is Texas is the better team. Texas didn't win it. Previous time they played, and I get if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, that might make you mad because y'all won the game, right? But the previous game, Georgia was the better team on that field. Absolutely. That Georgia defense, and I said it back then, that Georgia defense was beast moding it. And Texas beat them down. Like, they beat them. Like, that first half was dominating. I was looking at those halftime, like, getting closer to halftime. I'm like, dude, you've got to put the ball in the end zone. You are dominating this game. The defense for Texas was dominating that game. But you only had 6 points at halftime. And it's like, dude, you got to get the ball to the end zone. The other thing I'll say, man, is those officiating. Good gosh, they are horrible in the SEC. I mean, everybody's joked about it before, but my goodness, they are so bad. I don't want to see any talk about Quinn Ewers getting replaced. That's freaking stupid. The dude threw for over 350 yards. His first interception was a penalty, but they didn't call it. It should have been called pass interference, but there was no call. Ball was bounced up. Defender picked it off. Texas route runners were running all over the place. Georgia did get a lot of sacks. I'm not really a big, like, a sack is a big thing, but ball protection is most important. So if you're getting pressure, you don't want to do anything dumb with the ball. And they definitely didn't do anything really dumb with the ball. The one Quinn Ewers interception that he did throw was kind of late there in the 4th quarter. Threw an out route. Basically almost like the same throw as the first interception he threw, but this one was a really bad throw. It was a little bit more inside. It was picked off by the Georgia defender. And then Georgia comes out and with their backup quarterback and Stockton, he throws a pick. And honestly, Texas should have housed that ball. Should have housed that interception. But again, you're just getting a little too far ahead of yourself, and could have easily been a block there by another defensive player who was there against the only Georgia player on that side of the field. There was only one Georgia player on that side of the field where the interception took place on behalf of Texas from Stockton, but the Texas defender just turns upfield like, hey, I'm just going to run to the end zone. So I thought Texas was the better team. The officiating was definitely lopsided towards Georgia. It was awful. But Texas, they shot themselves in the foot a few times. They couldn't get the ball into the end zone. The other thing I'll say is play calling. My gosh, dude. Why was the play calling at the end of the game overtime, really, for Texas offense? Why was it fade routes in the end zone? I mean, that was how Texas' season ended last year against Washington. It was like four fade routes in the end zone. And it's just like, what are we doing with some of these play calling? It's like, just keep progressing the ball. Just keep moving the ball. Like, we don't need to be doing fade routes. It's like, you get to like the 13-yard line and you start doing these fade routes, and it's like, good gosh, what are you doing? What are you doing, man? So I'm pretty hopeful about the college football playoff. It sucks you're not going to get the bye, but you got 2 weeks off till you got to play again. Not the biggest detriment, right? But Texas looks very good. The defense looks amazing. The offense still needs to be clicking a little bit better. I do know that they were without their starting left tackle, Kelvin Banks, but Georgia's going to be really good in the college football playoff as well because they have a very good defense. And then you know what they say, defense wins championships, and definitely is going to be a big factor. All right, so moving over, let's talk about the rankings. Oh boy. I know that there is a lot of issues with how they do things, and I have a lot of thoughts, man. I got a lot of thoughts. They need to change the way they kind of do some of this stuff with the playoff committee and stuff like that. But we'll talk about that here in a sec. Oregon 1, Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame at 5, Ohio State 6, Tennessee 7, Indiana 8, Boise State, SMU, Alabama, Arizona State, Miami 13 there. Ole Miss, South Carolina, Clemson, BYU, Iowa State, Missouri 19, Illinois 20, Syracuse 21, Army, Colorado, UNLV, and Memphis. Okay. I am very much okay with the 12 teams that are going to the college football playoff ranking. But what is really interesting is this team right here, Clemson. Here's why this is very interesting. Is because I think they only moved up one slot, right? Because Iowa State dropped from their loss to Arizona State. So Clemson moved up one slot because of that. The reason why that's interesting is because you have SMU over here at 10. And SMU, 2 best wins are against BYU and Clemson. Everybody else they played was in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and they beat all those teams. So SMU sitting pretty good, being ranked there above Alabama. As far as some of the other rankings here, yeah, I mean, as far as the way the College Football Playoff Committee kind of has some of these, impacting the seeding is probably the biggest thing. All right, I believe you can see both the rankings on the left, and then you got the bracket or the seeding of the playoffs, 12-team playoff on the right. So this will be the seeding. Texas will be hosting Clemson. There you go, first round. That'll be pretty fun. Pretty good storylines actually in that game. Tennessee will be going to Ohio State. That's right. The Shoe will be hosting the Volunteers. SMU will be riding their Mustang all the way up to Penn State. That'd be interesting. Indiana will be going to Notre Dame. And then for the 4 byes, you got Arizona State, Georgia, Boise State, and then Oregon. So there you go. That's the 4 that are on byes. The other one conference championship that is not on bye, Clemson, because they are the lower ranking, right? Ranking 16 over here. I think the College Football Playoff Committee needs to not meet every week until they're going to do the final. Till they do that. Because that the week to week stuff, it makes it really difficult to assess the year in the total year that is. Because the SMU ranking at 10, and I'm glad SMU got in. Honestly, I have no issues with the 12 that are going at all. We could talk about, seeding or, how you want to match up teams, all that. Okay, well, you can have that conversation. But SMU, I'm glad they got in. But if I was on that committee, I wouldn't have put them in. I would have put in Alabama. And that's not trying to be a homer. That's not trying to be anything. When I look at the difference between SMU and Alabama, there is nothing that says SMU should be ranked even in the top 25. We, in college football, actually not me or we, people, however you rank teams, it is not done by wins and losses. It is how good you look. Sometimes you factor in wins and losses. I get that. But there are good teams out there that have multiple losses that aren't even ranked in the top 25 that are top 25 actual teams. These are just how we rank them because we have this mindset that every loss and every win is equal to all the other wins and losses out there. right? That's why the top team in the country typically usually has 0 or 1 loss. And then you have your group of 1 losses, and then you have like a group of 2 losses, and you have a group of 3 losses. And so like when a team loses, they drop from the 1 loss category to the 2 loss category, right? And so you drop that group of teams. And when you look at SMU, the 2 teams that they lost to, ranked here at 16 and 17, what gives you any justification to put SMU into the top 10 of rankings? If I would have ranked SMU after that Clemson loss, I would have knocked them back behind Clemson and BYU. I would have moved everybody else up 1, and I would have probably had SMU at 17. That's probably how I would have done it after that loss to Clemson. The reason why they didn't do it, and this goes back to they need to get rid of the weekly showing. Now, will they do that? No, because ESPN has, people tune into ESPN for this information. So will they get rid of the weekly stuff and just do one at the end of the year, final CFP rankings? No, because it brings them in viewers and money. So yeah, they're not going to do that. They should, because that's where the community got in trouble. And it's really interesting. Over the past couple of weeks, we've had teams that have lost, like Ohio State last week. They were number 2, and then they wound up dropping all the way to 6th. They dropped 4 slots. SMU, I think, was 7 or 8 last week, I believe. And now I'm not going to look it up, but they only dropped like 2 or 3 spots. Why? And here's here's another criteria. Like if you're trying to find the 12 best teams, not the 12 we feel good story teams, no, 12 best teams. These should be the 12 teams that when you ask each one of these teams, do they have a chance to win the college football championship? And when I ask that between Alabama and SMU, and I can ask that from SMU against Alabama or Ole Miss, South Carolina, I would say no, because if I put SMU against Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, I don't see SMU coming out of any one of those games the winner. So that's just kind of where I stand on that. I think they need to redo the revealing and dial it back a lot, because they got trapped into a situation where it's like, since we had SMU in the playoff last week, we cannot drop them out, because then it devalues the conference championship games, right? And you don't want to do that. You don't want conferences to say, well, we're going to get rid of the conference championship game if we're going to get penalized for it. So they just need to do away with the show and the college football committee rankings every week until you just do the final one. The final one's the only one that matters. The AP poll is roughly pretty close with the 12 team with the committee rankings week to week anyways. Like there's not much difference. So there doesn't need to be a weekly show of this, because the committee got caught this week saying, well, since we had them in last week, we can't punish them this week. Well, if you didn't have that ranking last week from the committee, you could come out this week and say, well, SMU lost to Clemson and BYU, so therefore they should be behind Clemson and BYU. There you go. That's it. So that would be the thing I would say. They really need to dial it back for how much maybe you do one mid-season, like, hey, this is what the committee thinks so far halfway through the season. Okay, fine, because there's so much still left to be played out, but it'll get people talking about it, I guess. But there's no reason for SMU to be ranked up there, up here with these teams when you lost to Clemson and BYU, and then your next best win is somewhere way down the line, right? Notre Dame, their best win is Texas A&M, Navy, Army. Is those 3 teams. So why is Notre Dame in the top 5? In my opinion, the 3 teams that shouldn't be in. Notre Dame, Indiana, and SMU. Those 3 teams. Those are the 3 teams that I still think are probably the biggest frauds here in the 12-team playoff. I'm fine with them being in, but those are the 3 biggest frauds, in my opinion. I don't think those 3 teams should be in because they haven't. None of these 3 teams. Not only have they not really shown out well against top-ranked teams, and the only one that's really even played a top-ranked team, I would say teams in the top 10, right? Other playoff teams. SMU did not. I mean, they played Clemson, but Clemson's down like in the, down to 16. So we'll say other top 10 teams. The only one team out of those 3 was Indiana. They played Ohio State. They went to Ohio State, and they got absolutely blown away. So where should they be ranked? I mean, it's interesting. Are you going to say that they're a top 10 team? No, they got obliterated. And I get it. It's like, well, are you going to put in Alabama? They got 3 losses. Well, it's like, yeah, but they also have good wins. They can also hang with big dogs. I think Alabama's worst win was that Oklahoma one. Vanderbilt, not really. Vanderbilt was a decent team this year. Oklahoma was also a decent team, but Alabama wound up losing to Oklahoma when Oklahoma was getting people back healthy finally. But that's just, I mean, that you can get really delve into that. I'm not on the committee, so we're not going to go through hours of debating this. But I don't know, Indiana. I'm not a fan, and you can always tell the people that don't really pay attention to college football that much, and they're just looking at wins and losses. Because if that was the case, everybody's just gonna play the absolute scrub teams. All the non-conference games are gonna be against absolute Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana, Southern Eastern Louisiana, right? Southern Alabama, Texas State. It's going to be those teams that are going to start popping up on everybody's schedule because there is no incentive to book and put on your schedule a hard team because that hard team might beat you. But losing to a hard team is the same as losing to an easy team. Well, then I'll take my chances of just beating an easy team. I'm not even going to worry about playing your Ohio States or your Texas or your USCs or your Georgias. So there's definitely some different ways that they can go about revealing some of this information. I think doing away with the week to week because that is where they got caught. They got caught, and that's why last week it was very interesting to see where they ranked certain teams. And they basically said, yeah, we didn't want to punish SMU for playing in a game where we had them in the playoffs last week, but they played an extra game and they lost. But if you were to come out this week and say, yeah, SMU should be ranked behind Clemson and BYU because they lost to both of them, makes perfectly logical sense. But because of last week's rankings, you could not come out and do that. Because then conferences are going to say, yeah, we're going to go to the conference championship game because we're just going to go to the playoff game with our teams. And there you're going to get more, I'd imagine probably just more SEC teams in, Big Ten teams in. So anyways, that's kind of one of my thoughts on that one. But the other thing that I thought was interesting, there needs to be a reseeding basically every round. And I'm actually very much okay with 4 teams getting first round buys. That makes perfect sense. 4 conference championship game winners, the highest 4 ranked conference championships get the first round buys. Understand, but you should not be locked in to this positioning. You just get a first round bye to the quarterfinals. Come back to that here in a second. And then obviously you get the 5th one, Clemson, this case, who would not get a first round bye because obviously you can't really fit that in because someone's got to play here and it just screws up everything. Anyways, but they would get a 5th one. You obviously get the 5th one in. Here's why I say I'm actually okay with the 4 conference championship game winners. A big reason why there is the bye is because these teams played an extra game. A lot of the at-large teams did not play an extra game, right? That's the whole point. It's like, hey, we're not going to ask conference championship game players and teams to play an extra game unless you're the loser and you're up there. like this case, Notre Dame, Indiana, they didn't play. They're at larges. Penn State, obviously SMU played. Ohio State, Tennessee, they didn't play. So that's going to be 5 of the 7 because Texas also played. So Texas and SMU are the 2 of the at-larges, of the 7 at-larges that played in conference championship games. That's just 2 teams. 2 teams that are going to play that extra game, and Clemson. Well, Clemson, but they're an automatic bid, just not a buy. So I think what it needs to be is the 4 highest seeded conference championships, conference championship game winners get buys, but they are not locked into any seeding. And then you arrange your opponents, the games, based on the committee ranking. I think that is the best thing. The other thing that winds up doing is you have a much more higher likelihood to get to that championship game with the top 2 teams. And that is what you're wanting in a playoff. When you lock it into a bracket like this, Texas is very much, does Oregon, why would it be fair for Oregon to play Texas here in the semifinal and Georgia play an inferior opponent, right? If you made it that far. So, like, you could get Penn State 4, Georgia 2 playing here in this semifinal, and you got Texas, Oregon possibly playing in this semifinal. But Oregon is ranked 1, Georgia's 2, Texas is 3, Penn State's 4. Why wouldn't Oregon, Penn State be playing in the semifinal, right? The goal should always be to get to the 2 best teams in the college championship, in the championship game, in a playoff. And that's not what you would have necessarily I would say in many cases, you would not necessarily have that situation happen. If you're Oregon, I would rather go through as many of the softer teams as possible. I kind of earned that. I'm the number 1 team. I should be able to go through more of the softer teams. So that's just kind of, something I think that they need to readjust this. They need to say, okay, you 4 teams can get first round buys, but the games in the quarterfinals will be seeded, or the games will be arranged based on the ranking. The highest seed will play the lowest seed, and then you go in any from there. That'd be one thing I'd say. Other than that, man, college football playoff, really looking forward to it. I'm really excited to see this. Some of these matchups, like SMU at Penn State, looks really neat. I'm really glad it's freaking here. We've all asked this. I think for the most part, they're really good on the teams. Obviously, I've kind of talked about some of these teams I'm not super high on, just because when you win against a bunch of scrub teams or beat a bunch of teams you're supposed to, it's not really an issue. Now, the other thing I will say about Alabama, or if you're even South Carolina or Ole Miss or Miami, and you feeling like you got robbed, then beat the scrub-ass teams like you're supposed to. So, yeah, you don't really get to freaking complain when you have bad losses. And, you controlled those times. And some of those losses are, like, real bad. I still think Alabama's worst losses against Oklahoma, because Oklahoma didn't have a good record. Even though Oklahoma lost to a lot of really good teams. But it is what it is. South Carolina got absolutely boat raced by Ole Miss, but you can nitpick all that all day. I do think they just need to redo seeding every round based on rank. But the 4 college championship game winners getting buys, the 4 highest ones at least, makes sense. It makes sense because most of the at-large teams won't be playing a conference championship game, so they should be playing. The other thing is what I've said before is, you just back out, make it. You can expand it. Honestly, you can have conference championship games that same weekend, like the weekend we just had. You just play the conference championship games there, make that the first round. You probably just, because that's essentially what they are. They're playoff games. They're playoff games, right? They're kind of more play-in games, but you can just call them what they are. They're just conference championship games, but they're also playoff games. but in some ways, kind of not, because SMU and Texas, I mean, are both, you know, they both. It's kind of like they get a 2-loss, like a double elimination tournament, right? But if you did make the conference championship game a part of the first round, and then you had a bunch of at-large games, why not do that? Why not just do that? And then you could have just had the final rankings, you know, the last week of the year, not even after college football, not even after the college football, not after conference championship weekend, right? So you could have had like Clemson and SMU play, and then you could have Texas, Georgia, Oregon, Penn State, Boise State, and who'd they play? UNLV, Arizona State, Iowa State, and then you could have had, you know, a few of these other at larges. You could have had, right? Who else did not play? Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, Indiana, Alabama. It would get more teams kind of involved into the playoff, but that way you're not having to worry about this funky bye, right? And a few teams playing an extra game more than everybody else. Anyways, that's kind of something I would say, because if you did that, let me do the math here. All right, so I had to redo my graphic department. You know, I had to do some work on this. Anyways, this is kind of what I was kind of meaning. Like, hey, just have the at large games on conference championship weekend. That way, nobody's getting like a weird extra game from losing a conference championship game, right? So basically, all of these teams, the way our college football rankings currently are, would be playing a conference championship week. So this would be like this slot out here before, I guess, what is now called the first round. So you can basically just call the conference championship weekend the first round of the playoffs. It's essentially what it is. Honestly, some teams were knocked out of the conference championship game, or of the college football playoffs. You'd have Oregon, Penn State, Georgia, Texas, Iowa State, Arizona State, Clemson, SMU, Notre Dame, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Tennessee, Miami, Indiana, Alabama. So that is just an idea of what you could do. You could just move, to that conference championship game weekend and have these games down here, these extra 4 games, have the at-large games played there, right? So just move with the at-large games to conference championship weekend, and go on from there. That way, there's no weird someone's playing an extra game situation. Just an idea, just a thought. I kind of like this idea. I don't know, let me know if you like this idea. Other than that, I got no issues with this. It's just weird having some teams play an extra game. Even a conference championship winner, even a Power 4 conference championship winner playing an extra game. I'm really looking forward to the 12-team playoff. Hope you are too.